Welcome to Locked On NFL. We were inspired by the NBA. So I'm going to tell you, if they had to redraft NFL players, I'll tell you why Patrick Mahomes is number one, and it's not even close. We'll do that and more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, joined by Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're going to bring it to you just like we do every day, where we give you some of the biggest stories from around the National Football League and some that we create, just like today. And I'll tell you in a second what we're going to do. But first, I'll tell you where you can find us, and that's wherever you listen or watch podcasts. Make sure you go there so you do not miss an episode of the show each and every day. Hello to the everydayer. Shout out to you. How you doing? And if you're new, hello to you too. And I'll give you a reason to come back. Hopefully, we're going to have some fun today here in the barbershop with me and Chris Carter. At the end of the show, I'm going to explain to you. First of all, this is what we're doing. Inspired by the NBA draft, Cooper Flagg went number one. I was watching and I'm like, man, if we could redo this, we do it every year in fantasy football, but real football, if we could do this every year, who would go number one? We know who that is. I'll tell you that at the very top. But what we're going to do in segment 2 and 3 is we're not going to choose quarterbacks. Segment 3, we're going to choose the best 2 defensive players and have a nice little spirited debate. Not necessarily the best, but who would be taken. And then we'll go 2 offensive players that are non-quarterbacks in the middle of the show. But we're going to start the show at the obvious place. It's always obvious, Chris, who the first. Did you watch the NBA draft? And if you did, you knew Cooper Flagg was going number one, correct?
Oh, yeah. Listen, I was there in person when Cooper Flagg absolutely destroyed Guillermo Diaz-Graham for Pitt in that super dunk that he had. It was like the best poster of the year. I was there live covering it in Duke. So, I was not surprised when I saw him go to Dallas.
Yeah, and so there's no surprise here who we're going to be talking about. But sometimes this thing is aided on how good your team is. We saw the first person in 2 Super Bowls look very, very pedestrian because of problems on the offensive line. But if you fix the offensive line and the receivers, well, Patrick Mahomes, he's going number one. Listen to this.
Hollywood Brown told us last week that he feels like that this could be he feels like it is the best group of pass catchers that he's played with in his career. And I have no reason to doubt him, because when those guys are all on the field, it does look like the best group of pass catchers that I think Patrick Mahomes has had since at least 2019, 2020 kind of eras.
All right, so yesterday the GOAT, Tom Brady, people thought as he was retiring and Mahomes was coming up that it was an Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor situation or a Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant situation. They thought he was jealous. Yesterday, Tom Brady said to Kevin Hart, I saw a clip of it. He said, when he asked who that dude was, he said it was Mahomes. And he talked about more than his talent, talked about the way he carried himself, talked about how he spoke after wins and losses. I think it's a no-brainer that Patrick Mahomes is still in his prime and will be easily in a redraft the number one player chosen by anybody in the NFL.
Absolutely. Why would you pick anyone else? We say it all the time. In the 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls, the Chiefs have made it. And why? Because Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback and player in the NFL. He changes everything. He works best with his system. I think people that, early in his career were like, oh, he's a system quarterback. And then you read, and then you just saw how many ridiculous things he kept doing. I'm like, yeah, what system is that? Just Patrick Mahomes is good. Patrick Mahomes, one off the board, no complaints here. I think the biggest question is who's the number 2 guy off the board.
Now look at that. So now look at Chris throwing me a 70-mile-per-hour softball right down the middle. Let me tell you what's going on here, bro. It's going to be quarterbacks for the next 7, 8 picks, possibly 5, right? But we ain't going to do that. That's why I said in segment 2, this ain't going to be a top 6 quarterback show. Segment 2, we're going to choose non-quarterback offensive players. I'm going to surprise you right now. This might not be my choice. This would be the choice to a whole bunch of people. Check this out.
Strosky, why is Josh Allen the most important player to the future of the Buffalo Bills?
You have to look at it this way, fellas. I mean, you're talking about a player that not very often can you say one man can win a football game alone by himself. And we've seen Josh Allen win games in Buffalo since his career started in Orchard Park many, many times by himself. He's a player that's generational. He is an amazing and might be the best athlete that we've seen at that quarterback position. Huge arm and an unbelievable asset for the Bills. And honestly, just arguably the best.
All right, now this is where I start a fight. Kevin Oestreicher isn't here, but when he hears about this, y'all saw him here Tuesday. He's going to call me and be like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" My personal choice is Lamar Jackson. This is who I think the consensus would be. I think because there would be a perception that Lamar may have one or two limitations that this kid doesn't. I don't agree with that, but I know that that's the way people feel.
I'm with you on Lamar Jackson. I know that there's this perception that Josh Allen does it all by himself. He doesn't. I think that he has a supporting cast. I think the biggest thing is that, you know, you look at Josh Allen's time in Buffalo, and I will say this past year he didn't have the receiving threat that he had for most of his time in Buffalo. But when he had Stephon Diggs, that's better than any receiver Lamar Jackson's ever had. You know, people say, "Oh, Mark Andrews." Mark Andrews is the guy to keep dropping passes in the biggest of games. If he catches that 2-point conversion or whatever it was against the Bills, Ravens probably win. You know, like they're still going right now. So, you know, Mark Andrews, and you go back to some of like Lamar Jackson's toughest numbers in the playoffs, they often come from Mark Andrews drops. There was, I think, one game against the Titans, he dropped 2 passes that turned into interceptions. So when you talk about the best options, Zay Flowers as a second-year receiver might be the best receiver Lamar Jackson's ever had to work with. That's why I give him the edge. Now, I will say Derrick Henry has certainly changed things up here, but I'm gonna let that play out a little bit longer before I say it. But yeah, Lamar Jackson, he's my number 2. I'd say Josh Allen's my number 3. Joe Burrow is my number 4.
That's probably where I go with it too. Although I'm a big Joe Burrow fan, and it's not play that puts Joe Burrow behind Josh Allen to me. It's durability, because I think Joe, you know, and that might not be his fault. This is the part where I say, I told you, team has an effect on it. I'm thinking Burrow ain't durable because he's played behind an offensive line. He's been having to run for his life. The difference between Buffalo and Cincinnati is team building. So sometimes what other people do absolutely affects how we feel about certain players. This is what we're going to do. A GM told me a few years ago, he asked me who I liked. And I said, I like this guy. He said, that's easy scouting. Give me somebody else. Easy scouting. The next year I told him I like somebody, he said, easy scouting. It gets harder when you move into the second, third round. So it's going to get harder now, even though we're going to still mention great players. I might shock some people here in segment number 2 when I tell people who is the first non-QB offensive player I would take, the first and the second. Now, this one is all about me. This ain't about a consensus. And then I'll let and see if Chris disagrees with me. I'll give you a little hint. They're tied together at the hip, and they're always mentioned together for some reason, and they play different positions. We'll get on that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. Man, ever wish your money felt easier? Managing it has to feel easier, right? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. The thing that surprised me most, and when I noticed it, is how much money I was actually wasting by not having Monarch Money. One thing about me, I don't like wasting my hard-earned money, and you shouldn't either. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Locked On NFL, being inspired by the National Basketball Association and their NBA draft last night. I love when you see what GMs have done and what they would do. It's hard to do it when you're not really a GM, when you can just play GM like we are doing today. But we're talking about players, if they redrafted the entire NFL, who would be picked? And I'm not talking about a fantasy football format, because quarterbacks usually go second and third round. I'm talking about real NFL team building. We're not going to choose any more quarterbacks, though, but we're all going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. And I may shock a few people here. But my first non-quarterback that I would take on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe period, is this guy. He plays for this team, but it'll be affected by whether or not a running mate of his can be replaced. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Penei Sewell. But something has to happen before he continues to do what he's been doing. They got to find out if that unit can stay together, and there's a reason.
So how many Lions made the all-rookie team preseason, according to NFL.com? The answer is 1. And that 1 would be Tate Rattlage, who is listed as the all-rookie center. I've been lathering up in the Rattlage butter for months now, since the Lions drafted him back in April. The Lions were already cross-training Rattlage at guard and center before Ragnow officially decided to hang it up. And I do believe that he's going to be the best rookie center in this class.
My man said he had been lathering up in in soap or whatever he called it. My man Matt Derry, he will come up with a one-liner for you ain't never heard before, except in the barbershop. But here's my point about Penei Sewell. If that unit doesn't perform at the same level, will he be considered the same? I think he will, because Tate don't lie. Individually, that dude, even though he plays right tackle, is one of the best I have ever seen in my 40-some-odd years watching football.
Yeah, I think Penei Sewell, and I think it goes back to the debate that like you were kind of hinting at, is when Penei Sewell was taken, or when Jamar Chase was taken over, and the Bengals had that question, who do you pair with Joe Burrow? Who do you pair with Joe Burrow? Do you get a prime tackle to protect him, or do you get a prime receiver to give him the ball? And you know, I think over time, people have kind of said the results kind of show Penei Sewell is more important, because look at Joe Burrow. In his first 5 years in the NFL, he's made the playoffs just twice. And part of it's because he's missed 2 seasons because he was getting hit all the time. And they can't get him any good protection. And whereas Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are arguably the best wide receiver duo in the NFL right now, and they certainly have that, and they're keeping those guys, you have big questions still about protecting Joe Burrow and his longevity. Whereas the Lions, you know, they've got Penei Sewell. They don't even have a Joe Burrow. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think that he's on that level of T. Higgins, but not Jamar Chase. But like, you know, you look at that, and they're rocking. They're still a threat right now. So yeah, I'm right with you. Penei Sewell. My question to you in this fantasy draft: are we taking these guys at their current age, or are we resetting their ages? Because if we are resetting their ages, I got to go with Trent Williams, because that man is a bad dude.
Yeah, no. We're taking them where they are right now. And I'm glad, and I'm really glad you asked that one, because in Seg 3, that was going to come into play real heavy. You already know where I'm going with it. Yeah. So
I do.
Yeah.
My question for you though: where do you in the non QB offensive players, where do you put Saquon Barkley?
I would put him outside of the top 10 because of positional value. But in terms of pure football player, top 5. Top 5. I'll give you an example of why I did that.
Okay.
If you go back to the Monty Kiffin Bucks that won the Super Bowl, that had Warren Sapp and John Lynch and Tiki Barber, Derek Brooks, that's 4 Hall of Famers already named, right? And we ain't even mentioned Simeon Rice, who probably should be in consideration because they had 120 some odd sacks. Yep. Warren Sapp's going first, but Warren Sapp said the best player on the team, the best football player, was that weak side linebacker named Derek Brooks. And I get it. Hey, sometimes the positional value, and I'm glad you asked me that question too, because the next pick, it ain't about positional value. It's actually connected to the dude, and you already mentioned his name. And it was close between him and his college teammate. But Jamar Chase has been so good. If he was a little bit, let's just say Jamar Chase was as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown, we would be beating Cincinnati to pieces, way worse than they are. But I don't know how you can do it now when he probably is the best wide receiver in the league, and they might even have a good. Look at you. Look at you.
I give to Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I know.
He's LSU buddy.
I know. You think he's the second best. I think he's the best. I like the bully ball aspect of it. But their offense also, if they can't run the ball, those numbers are going to even justify it even more. Check out what might be going on with their offense this year.
Do the Cincinnati Bengals suddenly have a bottom half of the NFL roster? I'm not quite buying it. PFF sees it as the Bengals roster has fallen off precipitously from 2024. when they had the Bengals ranked as the 7th best roster in the league. Now they see it as 18th best. And
I know why PFF did it. They're going to say all of these ifs and questions, and there are ifs and questions. And both of us, I think, have been very clear about our frustration with what the Bengals haven't done this offseason to address specific areas. And even with that said, they still have a chance to be really, really, really good because of those top players that they have on their roster.
That's how good Jamar Chase is. They're so bad, but the fact that him, Burrow, and I would put T. Higgins in there a little bit. It's mainly Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. They are keeping them. I'm telling you, they are keeping them afloat. They would hands down be, in my opinion, one of the worst 3 or 4 rosters in the league. But with those two guys, I put them right in the middle of the NFL. They're just that good.
I'm not sure if I put them at the bottom, but like this is my thing with the Bengals is that they've overinvested into these two positions, wide receiver and quarterback, and they haven't hit on anything else. You know, and they got Trey Hendrickson, and he doesn't want to play for them anymore. And the guy that they drafted to replace with Shamar Stewart doesn't even want to show up. And you keep messing thing up. Your defense is already really, really bad. Your offensive line is still very bad. But so what else do you got going for you? If your defense is bad, your own line's bad, you need those guys to carry you. And here's the thing again, the Penei Sewell lesson. If Joe Burrow gets hurt, what do you do then? Then you are the worst team in the NFL. Like that's the level that you're. And so I get James and Jake saying, "Hey, I don't think they're bottom 7." I agree with that, but I think they're the bottom half of the league, and particularly because they got nothing else going on for them now. If their defense develops some players this year that all of a sudden show up and they're a better unit, there, great, awesome, congratulations, but they got to show it before I believe it. And like frankly, like I think that's the biggest problem with them. I would not be shocked if the Cincinnati Bengals in their 6th year with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase missed the playoff for a 4th time this year. I
wouldn't be shocked either. And that goes back to what we're saying. Now, we do need to examine this. If you swapped them right now, if you put Penei Sewell on the Bengals team and Jamar Chase over on Detroit's team, in their current state, which way do those teams go? Do Detroit get better or worse? And then does Cincinnati get better or worse?
I think Detroit gets worse because even though you do get Jamar Chase and that's an upgrade over Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell is so important to what they do because they have such a balanced offense with the run game and play action and how that works. And if you don't have that dominant left tackle, that takes a hit on things. And Jamar Chase certainly would help you open things up more, but you have Jared Goff over there. You don't have Joe Burrow. And again, I think Joe Burrow is a top 5 player in the NFL right now when we're just considering the quarterback position. But you put Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown on the or no, are we just doing Penei Sewell? We're not swapping
just those two.
Just Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase.
Detroit's dangerous, but they would have to change the way they play. And Cincinnati would have to change the way they play. And guess what? Some people might say, good that the Bengals would have to change the way that they play because they would depend more on ball control, the fact that they would be able to run the ball, the fact that Burrow would have a little bit more protection would allow him to cook a little bit more with T. Higgins and whoever would replace him. That just goes back to positional value. And that's why I like doing this. But we're going to switch to the other side of the ball, Chris, a side that the team you cover in Pittsburgh has always managed to find really good players. Defense. I mentioned Pittsburgh. The person that I would take first, people in Pittsburgh don't talk about it much. He was swinging helmets and everything. We'll talk about Myles Garrett as my choice. Is the number 1 non-quarterback and non-offensive player taken in our redraft of the National Football League in honor of the NBA draft last night. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Hey guys, I know you probably heard of Viagra and Cialis, and maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, Rougiet Ready is what you need to be looking for. Rougiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiet's 3-in-1 formula resolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Now, sometimes other options don't work, and Rougiet may be the answer. It has been for over 150,000 men already. and they have made the switch. Head to Rougier.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rougier.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off rather. RUGIET is what it is. All right. Individuals' results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougier website for full safety information. All right, part 3 of a redraft that we're having here. First segment, we went with best player available, which is obviously quarterback. We cut it off after 2 quarterbacks and said, okay, segment 2, we're going to talk about offensive players who aren't quarterbacks. We did that. And those 2 guys were tied at the hip together, drafted in the same draft, Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase. And now we got to choose defense. My first defensive player, in my opinion, is the best defensive player in the NFL. No disrespect to T.J. Watt, no disrespect to Micah Parsons. But you want to talk about top heavy. Man, Cleveland is seriously top heavy and with just that one guy. And that's Myles Garrett. Listen to Spencer. Spencer's going to talk about how PFF and all of these games have said that Cleveland's roster stinks. Check this out.
There was a ranking from PFF that basically broke down the rosters of all 32 teams. The Browns were somehow 32nd. I just find that hard to believe. I do not buy for a second that the Browns have the 32nd best, or I guess worst, the absolute worst roster in football based on the guys that are on this team. We're talking about a roster that has Myles Garrett on it. We're talking about a roster that has Denzel Ward on it. Those are 2 of the best players at their respective positions in football.
Yeah, and Spencer, you know what? Keep going down that list and see where everybody else stacks up. I agree that Cleveland is bad. I don't think they're awful. I think they're poorly constructed, and everything has been the way it is because of Deshaun Watson and the money that they spent. You got any problems or any objections to Myles Garrett being my first non-offensive player?
Yes. What are you thinking? Okay, I am so tired of these random metrics that make Myles Garrett need more pressures, more boo, I scare yous, more I don't get the play done, where I get my team a losing season for like the 7th time in my career.
Oh, man.
What? No. Okay. Let's look at this. Tony?
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, Myles Garrett, you know the one thing he has more than T.J. Watt?
What, Chris?
Games played. But with less games played, T.J. Watt has more sacks, more tackles for loss, more interceptions, more passes broken up, more forced fumbles, more recovered fumbles, more everything. Just line by line by line, play by play by play. And in less games, TJ Watt's a better player. And he's been consistently throughout his career. The only time that you can say Myles Garrett's better was TJ got injured for half a season, and Myles Garrett got to play a bit more. But let's just I think this is the thing that Pittsburgh fans are so tired of the Myles Garrett conversation is that he has more quarterback scare plays. Okay, but when like the how do you quantify a quarterback scare play? Because a lot of those plays, like I went back and I charted like games where PFF gave him such a better grade than TJ Watt in a game, and I'm like, TJ Watt literally had more pressures, more sacks, more tackles. How does Myles Garrett get a better grade here? And then also he scored a touchdown in that same game. Myles Garrett was like nowhere to be found. He had one tackle. That's it. And I was just like, how do we keep doing this thing where Myles Garrett's these made up stats where my whole life it was, do you get more sacks? Do you get more tackles? Do you create more turnovers? All right. That's what makes you better. And does your team win more often? All those categories, TJ Watt's team checks off the board. The only thing Myles Garrett, I think, can hold over TJ Watt's head is that when the two teams faced off in the playoffs 5 years ago, the Browns won. And that's cool. Good job. In that one day, you had a better day than TJ Watt's team. Your team had a better day than TJ Watt's team. But on their careers, TJ Watt is a better player. It is a done deal. And people used to say, TJ Watt doesn't get double teamed. And that's because PFF, their numbers said double team had to include 2 specific positions to count as a double team. And until this year, they said, okay, we're going to count all positions into double teams. And TJ Watt was contacted by 2 players 50 more times than Myles Garrett was. So when people say TJ Watt doesn't go through double team, yes, he does. regularly. Teams playing their entire offense to stop him. And that is what they do. Sean McVay's even one time when TJ Watt lined up at like an off-ball linebacker position, they showed like a clip of him on the sideline saying, why is TJ Watt there? That's not what we practiced for. TJ Watt then picks off Matt Stafford. He's like, how? How does he do this to us? That is who TJ Watt is. He is a menace from start to finish. And the one thing that TJ Watt said this year is like, hey, you know what? We haven't moved me around a whole lot in my career. This year, maybe we start to do that. TJ Watt's the best defensive player in the NFL, hands down, case closed.
All right, so I ain't gonna argue with you, Chris. In fact, I will admit something though. I'm a menace. You know, I did that on purpose, right?
Yes, yes, you did.
Know, I
did
did
complete range bait.
I did it to pull all that. I knew it was coming, baby. I knew. I said, Chris ain't gonna let me down. Watch CC, and then when I looked up, you were like this. Yes, and I knew.
I was like, you know, because you knew what you did.
I know what I did. So to Chris, it's TJ Watt, and it's probably Myles Garrett, number 2. My number 2 player, I'm just play a clip, man, and this is gonna shock you. This is why when Chris asked me the question about Penei Sewell and Trent Williams, I went with the younger player where he is right now and where he would be drafted. Because a lot of times in these drafts, especially in the NBA, that was the motivation. You might see 2 equal players, and one guy's 22 and he spent 4 years in college. Another guy's 18 and he, like Cooper Flagg, he declared early. Cooper Flagg should have been graduating high school this year. And you go, oh, they might be the same, but there's a more blue sky over here. So I'm going to tell you right now, the team that this guy plays for is actually switching up. He's not going to be mentioned, but he is the reason why the team that I'm about to play, why they're able to move a whole bunch of people around on the second and third level, is because of what they got up front. Check this out.
I do think you'll see these guys in different spots than you did last year. And I think that's exciting because that's, again, something this Eagles defense, even in years where they were truly elite, they didn't have a lot of Swiss Army knives. Now on all 3 levels of this defense, you got players that can play all across the formation. And I think Zach Bond is included in that. Again, he is a elite inside linebacker. That's where he's going to play 90% of the time, just like Cooper DeJean in the slot. But maybe Vic Fangio is saying, hey, let's get him to go after the quarterback a little bit more this year. And I like that idea. I just like the idea of the Eagles thinking about evolving.
I want you to go back and watch a replay of the Super Bowl. Jaylen Carter is considered a 3 technique. In that game, he lined up at nose tackle. They had that Ojomo kid, and they had that Williams kid, and then they had stand-up guys on the outside. Jaylen Carter is the straw that stirs this entire thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. He is disruptive. All of the talk about him in the pre-draft process was blown way out of proportion. Not only is he violent, disruptive, strong at the point of attack against the run, he can also rush the passer, and he does not need to get the sack to get the credit for the play actually happening. I would take Jaylen Carter right now because of the fact that he is the menace that he is over Chris Jones. And I know that's very hard to do because Chris Jones is in GOAT territory, right there with Aaron Donald in terms of history as defensive tackles.
I wouldn't put Chris Jones in Aaron Donald territory.
I say Donald's here, but then you got Warren Sapp, Chris Jones, and the reason why is because Chris Jones got that hardware too. But that's what I mean. He's hanging around there. Yeah,
I think Chris Jones is one of the best interior pass rushers of all time. But to be the greatest of all time, you got to do the interior pass rushing and the run stuffing. And like I think like right now, Cam Hayward's a better run stuffer than Chris Jones. Chris Jones a better pass rusher, and I would say a better defensive tackle than Cam Hayward. But they're in that conversation. But to your point about Jaylen Carter, he has the potential to be both, and he's entering his 3rd year in the NFL. Chris Jones and Cam Hayward have been in the league for a long time. Both of them are established veterans. They're gonna both go to the Hall of Fame at some point. Jaylen Carter's just getting started, and he's this terrifying. And granted, we all knew he'd be this terrifying. That's why I remember I was sitting with our boy Keon Myers of Locked On Raiders at the Combine the year that Jaylen Carter was supposed to get was getting interviewed at the Combine, and like the news came out that he's there's a warrant out for him or whatever, and so then it was right about when he was about to speak, which I was always kind of like that was a little cheeky that it went out right before he was about to speak, and I was like, okay, y'all knew what y'all was doing, but Jaylen Carter, once they got cleared, and I was like, man, it shouldn't impact him too much. Y'all better not let this man fall down to like a really competitive team. lo and behold, he fell down to the Eagles, and it was just like, oh boy, because here go the Eagles, and now they got a dominant defensive front led by a guy who could be the biggest dog in the middle of the defense. I like your pick of Jaylen Carter here. I'll even say this: I'd take Jaylen Carter over Myles Garrett.
Ooh, now we cooking with hot grease. I mean, man. Chris, you deep with it, boy. I mean, I'm just trying to make sure now this ain't no Pittsburgh and Cleveland thing. What's that road that connects y'all? 70, 76, or whatever, I-80, whatever. Y'all ain't this ain't no little beef up there now between you and the Cleveland.
David's just acknowledging that one player's entire basis for why he's better than another is based off of stats that aren't hard stats that are very subjective. And when you look at all the objective stats, the ones that are hard determined by the NFL and official, he's beaten in all of those. And I look at Jaylen Carter, and if we're talking about young players, like if I'm talking about drafting for the future, I might take Jaylen Carter first overall. I think if we're taking best player right now, TJ Watt has that. But if I'm talking about I need to build and I'm building my dynasty for the long term, I might take Jaylen Carter as my top defensive player. I also throw in Patrick Surtain because I do think he's that good at cornerback.
I also think he is very good also at cornerback. Man, this is why it's so fun to talk about stuff like this, the subjective nature of it, the fun that we have, the rivalries, the little nuances and idiosyncrasies of the whole thing. And this is what makes all of these teams different around the NFL. You want to know where they get all the information from scouting. You have an idea, watch Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, because you'll become smarter and you'll have opinions the way Chris Carter just rolled off all of his opinions about Myles Garrett. That's right. Make sure you tap in and make it your second listen. And also check out Mr. Carter, or you can read him at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, but mainly right here on Locked On NFL or Locked On Steelers. And he does a great, fabulous job. The whole NFL will be watching them this year because of Aaron Rodgers, of course. And we'll see you next time here on Locked On NFL. Y'all make sure y'all take care of each other. I'm still taking Myles Garrett. I don't care what Chris talking about. I'm taking Myles Garrett.
You crazy.